Hey everyone, welcome to my first edition of my NASCAR videos here in my NASCAR package at Roto Grinders. Going to be kind of going over some stuff here. I know a lot of people are going to be watching this on demand. This is really going to be geared towards guys that really haven't played a lot of fantasy NASCAR over at DraftKings or just in general. So this video is going to be more for them. So if you're a veteran, if you were in this package a lot last year, always good to refresh your brain, but this is definitely going to be more for people that are just getting started here. Going to be about a 20-25 minute video. Not going to overly extend these videos. I want them to be watchable for you guys. So we're going to get started here talking about DraftKings scoring. Obviously, like I said, this is going to be geared a lot more towards people that are just getting started out, and then not understanding the scoring is your first mistake, especially when it comes to NASCAR. The terms are much different than what we see for basketball, baseball, hockey, all these other sports. So the first thing that we need to cover is place differential, because it's going to be a thing that I'm going to talk about a lot in this package this year. You guys are all season subscribers at this point. We haven't done any weekly, so you guys are in for the long haul with me this year. So place differential is going to be a thing that I'm going to talk about a lot. Some races we're going to want 2 guys. Some guys sometimes we're going to want 4 guys. Place differential is a thing. Daytona coming up. Daytona is the first race of the season. Place differential is massive when it comes to Daytona. So the best way to give an example of place differential, if a guy starts 3rd and he finishes 10th, he's going to be -7 place differential. Still going to pick up 27 actual DraftKings points just for that if you add fastest laps or if he leads any laps. So he's still going to score a positive score, but there's not going to be many times this season that you're going to win with a 27 in your lineup for a guy that starts 3rd. So if it's a slower car, if it's practice speeds are slow or whatever, and we think that he's going to fall back and get negative place differential, we want guys with positive place differential. We want those points. Sometimes we got guys starting 30th that can outscore guys starting 5th because of place differential. And it's going to be a thing that is talked about a lot. Obviously, fastest laps for scoring is pretty simple. Any type of green flag lap, we're going to have fastest laps. It's 0.5 fantasy points per fastest lap. So as long as it's during green flag, whoever runs the fastest lap that lap is going to pick up the fastest lap. You can definitely project these when you're looking at practice speeds. You're, factoring in a guy running out front, because clean air in NASCAR, another term that we'll talk about throughout the season is, just a guy running first. He's got clean air in front of him. He doesn't have a guy in front of him. So cars are always going to perform better with no cars in front of them. So, fastest laps, definitely predictable. Obviously, anything can happen when you're talking about race cars going around a race car track. And then laps led. Laps leds are pretty simple. If we have 500 laps a race, there's going to be 500 laps led, as long as we don't get any rain-shortened races or anything like that. And it's 0.25 points for laps led. Sometimes people are going to dominate races like Martin Truex, and then sometimes we're going to have 5 or 6 guys lead laps. So definitely projectable, and it's going to be a thing that we talk about a lot this season. So I wanted to, definitely, cover those. Fastest laps and laps led are called dominator points. It's just a term that we use here in fantasy NASCAR. We're going to be talking about dominator points a lot this season. It's going to be one of those things where we're looking at, either getting 3 place differential guys in a lineup with 3 dominators. 2 dominators is very simple type of roster construction last year with getting 4 place differential guys. That was a strategy we used a lot in this package last year. It's going to be a package or a strategy that I use a lot in this package this year. So understanding dominators and understanding place differential is definitely where I wanted to start. Obviously, if you guys ever have any questions about this kind of stuff, feel free to, if you're watching live, I have chat opened. I think you guys can definitely tune in by chat. You can ask me on Twitter. I'm open to you guys. You guys are helping me out by purchasing the package, so I'm obviously helping you guys out when it comes to answering any type of questions. Next thing that we need to talk about, obviously, is stats. When we're talking about stats that we're going to be looking at throughout the season. So NASCAR, like I said, not very comparable as far as stats go. We don't have defensive position or, what's the guy's WOBA or anything like that. So in NASCAR, one of the most stats that we're going to use a lot is driver rating. Driver rating is like your WOBA. It's the best, stat that we can kind of, get intel on. What was the guy's driver rating last year? What was his driver rating the year before that? Maybe what was his driver rating at that racetrack earlier this season? So driver rating definitely going to be something that we're going to talk about a lot. It takes in the average running position, the average finish, the average speed, fastest laps, and then it bonuses it out with wins, top 15s, most laps led, lead lap finish, averaging running position better than 10th, 6th, and 2nd. So there's a lot that goes into the driver rating. It's the first stat that I look at every week to kind of get an idea of track history for that week. So definitely a stat that you guys definitely need to know is driver rating. Outside of that, average running position was something that I just mentioned. The stat's very important. It's a spot that anything under 10 average running position is elite. That means he's running in the top 10 for the most part. 11 to 15 is very solid number. We really want to be targeting those guys that have those, elite average running positions, but just another stat that, you're going to have to want to know, this season for NASCAR. And as the season goes along, as we get closer, I'm going to do a few more videos driven towards, building routines and stuff like that. This first video, I just wanted to make sure you guys knew that, the terms and stuff like that. Stats resource for NASCAR, like Fangraphs or baseball. There's a couple sites that you can use. Driveraverages.com has some stats over there. We have some stats here at Roto Grinders that we're buffing up. There'll obviously be stats in the package as well. So there's a couple different places. One of the best season-long sites is jayski.com. It's actually spelled the same way it's pronounced. It's jayski.com. You can get a lot of practice data and qualifying data and stuff like that off of there. But like I said, we're going to have a lot of those stats there for you. But Driver Average is probably one of the better sites to use just overall stats-wise. Another couple stats that you're going to want to learn is quality pass percentage. If you have a guy that has a really high quality pass percentage, obviously this is a guy that we know can move through the field. And those are the types of guys that maybe they qualify bad and, we got them starting 20th to 25th, 30th, something like that. But their quality pass percentage is really high at this type of track. And, that's definitely something that we want to pay attention to because not a lot of people are ever looking at quality pass percentage. I think it's an overlooked stat when it comes to fantasy NASCAR. And it's one of my favorite stats to look at to try to find those guys in the back that can move up. So quality pass percentage, green flag passes and green flag pass. If you have a guy that has a lot of negative green flag passes at a track, he might just struggle at that track type. You have to look into it. So make sure you guys are definitely paying attention to green flag passes. It's a really important stat that I feel like it's one of the most overlooked things as well. And then when you're looking at your research, you'll have to understand the track types. Obviously, you can break it down into 4 easy types. You have your short tracks, your intermediate tracks, your super speedways, your road courses. But looking in depth to those a little bit more, where you got your super speedways, restrictor plate races, or Daytona and Talladega. They're the closest things you're going to get to the big tracks. Road courses the same way. You have Watkins Glen, you have Sonoma. So, you definitely have those 2 types of tracks where you don't have to really look elsewhere. They're a little different as far as both those tracks go for each type, but as far as they go, that's really the only comparable you're going to have to each other. So then when we get into other stuff, we can start looking at flat banked tracks. Bankings from 2 degrees to 14 degrees is usually what they call the flat bank tracks. Martinsville, New Hampshire, Phoenix, Richmond. So you can kind of understand which intermediate tracks have the flat bank tracks to kind of compare to get an idea. And then you'll have shallow bank tracks that, Indianapolis, Pocono are these 2 types of tracks where they're shallow bank tracks. So, those are the 2 types of tracks that you would kind of compare to each other. Steep bank tracks, obviously you have Bristol that has that massive bank. Darlington has a massive bank. Dover the same way. Homestead, They put Homestead in the steep bank tracks. It's not as banked as the other 2 or 3. It still has a definite bank. And then Las Vegas is also another steep bank track. So we can kind of look at the data there. Like Kyle Larson, for instance, he's super good at Homestead, really good at Las Vegas as well. He runs that high line really well at these steep bank tracks, and he'll go into that line a lot faster than anybody else. Bristol as well, he's very good there. So, like, just for instance, Kyle Larson might be a guy that we target more at the steep bank tracks, looking at his past data and seeing what he's been able to do at these types of tracks. Then we have our cookie cutter tracks. They're in this grouping because, well, they're almost identical to each other. Atlanta, Charlotte, and Texas. This year, anyway, they're repaving Atlanta after the season's done. So once we finish up there on March 5th or 4th, we're done there. They're going to repave the track, so we'll have to see what they do with the track. Hopefully it's nothing. Hopefully it's just a simple repave. But Atlanta, Charlotte, Texas, very, very similar to each other. So we can really use data on those 3 tracks from last year with the new downforce package and stuff, and kind of compare what to look for this year at those types of tracks. The only difference between those tracks really is Atlanta's really old and it wears down the tires a tremendous amount. So, and then you have 5 odd tracks that really aren't, near anything else. The 2 milers are Fontana and Michigan. They're Penske tracks. It's something that we've been, targeting for Penske for a while. Kentucky and Chicagoland. And then, what was the last one? Hold on. I know there's one more there. Chicagoland, Kansas, Kentucky, Fontana, Michigan. So, those 5 tracks, not going to get a lot of comparable data, but they're kind of in their own right there. So only go to those tracks, I think, once a year for the most part. Kentucky, Chicagoland are pretty close to each other. But outside of that, this track's not very similar. So once we get the track types down, we're starting to get our research done in the beginning part of the week before we even get into practice and stuff. We're starting to look at past data. We're starting to get everything put together. The best thing about NASCAR is it's a weekly sport, so it's not daily. So you have an extra hour a night that you can kind of prep yourself all the way up until we get into practice and qualifying. Practice, for the most part, first practice will always usually be before qualifying. 90% of the time, this is not necessary for anything that we're going to do with fantasy. First practice, they're really working on qualifying trim or beginning parts of their race trim. So for the most part, unless we have rain in the forecast for the next day, because they usually qualify and practice on Friday, do their second and third practice on Saturday and race on Sunday. So unless Saturday is supposed to be like a complete wash, it's the only time we'll really look at first practice. But for the most part, we're not going to be looking at first practice a lot this season. Then we get into qualifying. Qualifying is by far the most important thing when it comes to fantasy NASCAR. Obviously, we're going to talk about qualifying all season long. It's by far the most important thing when it comes to NASCAR because, it sets the field. So pricing sets the field and matchup sets the field in other sports. But qualifying in NASCAR is like Golden State playing Chicago or Golden State playing San Antonio. It's going to be your setup for the entire match, or in this case, race. So it's by far the most important thing. Qualifying, because anything can happen during qualifying. For instance, last year, a couple times, somebody hit the wall in their first lap of qualifying and couldn't get back out on the track. So this guy's going to start last place, and maybe he's a top 10 car. Instantly, in other sports, you can fade that guy, but in NASCAR, you just can't fade that guy. That's how important qualifying is. Starting position is singly the most important thing. Obviously, we're going to talk about practice and stuff like that, but not only will qualifying help you determine value, it's also going to help you determine bad plays. Say a guy that, for instance, a guy that I just reading about, Cole Witt. Cole Witt, for some reason, qualifies in the top 10. This guy doesn't finish in the top 20, I think maybe once or twice all season. So if this guy just happens to have the qualifying rounds of his life, maybe have the car set up and everybody else is set up in race trim, it can happen. just for some odd reason, this guy starts in the top 10. Like, he's the easiest fade on the board, even at his like almost next to nothing price, and he'll be popular. And us over here in the NASCAR package, we're going to be making that money on that guy being popular. So a lot of value can be determined between qualifying and practice. Using practice data is something that some people use it the right way, some people don't. Not every race has 3 practices, but it's becoming a lot more common over the last 2 or 3 years to really have 2 extra practices after qualifying. They're talking about cutting them down this season, so they're going to be even more important. One thing that you do want to pay attention to when it comes to practice is the times of the practice. For example, second practice is at 10 a.m., happy hours at 1 p.m. The race on Sunday starts at 1 p.m. You're going to really want to focus on that final, happy hour, because like that's the race time, same type of conditions probably. So a lot can be learned just paying attention to when that happy hour is, or whenever the practice is closest to race time. So if we have a night race and they're only practicing during the day, some of the data might not transform over to the night. So really going to have to pay attention to what time the practices are and stuff like that. We used to get 5-lap data for practices. We're still fighting very hard to make this happen again. Right now, we're only seeing a lot of 10-lap data. 10-lap run data is something that we're going to talk about a lot. I have the practice notes section here in the package every week that I'll print out the top 10 or the top 10-lap data, and I'll put that over there. If you guys were here last year, you guys got to see that. If not, all it is it's going to be a sheet that shows 10-lap times compared to 1-lap times, their fastest lap, their slowest lap, what laps they're running those fastest laps in. So let's say we got a guy come out and he just blows it away in his first 10 laps, and the next best guy is maybe on lap 35 to 45. Well, that guy is getting continuously better throughout the day practicing. If he's going, if he's running his best 10-lap run later in his run, they're really making adjustments to that car. He's going to be a value. Really going to have to pay attention to that. It's something that, you definitely want to pay attention to what laps they're doing it on. 10-lap data is something that is used a lot when it comes to fantasy NASCAR. So understanding 10-lap data is definitely something we're going to do. And like I said, that's going to be available to you guys here each week, every day in the practice notes section. I mentioned the track types. Obviously, adjusting to the track types. First race of the season is Daytona. It's coming right up. It's coming up faster than we expected. For anybody that played last year that's had this little bit of break. And Daytona is an animal. We're going to definitely have some strategy talk here for Daytona coming up on the NASCAR package. Obviously, Denny Hamlin's done really well, over the last few races here. Really when it comes to fantasy NASCAR, we're really just wanting to target guys that struggle in qualifying because it's a super speedway and fastest laps are going to come from all over the place, where on those intermediate tracks and other tracks that we talked about, a lot of the fastest laps are going to come from up front. It's not necessarily the case for these super speedways. So that will change. Adjusting to the tracks is something we'll talk about throughout this whole thing. So really everything that we're talking about here today, to be successful, you're really going to have to want to identify everything, past stats, qualifying, which practice, 10-lap practice runs, types of tracks, dominators you want to have, place differential guys we're going to have. Obviously, I'm going to be helping you guys do this throughout the year. But understanding the research is, half the battle as well. So you don't want to just blindly take my guys. Hopefully they'll always win for you. But, at the end of the day, you're going to want to understand, how to be successful. And I've become very successful when it comes to NASCAR cash games, which is completely opposite to what I'm used to. NASCAR is one of the only sports that play cash games anymore because there's such an edge. And my job this year is going to be to help you guys gain that edge and teach you guys everything that I've learned here. Really, you know, this package is built for you guys. So, you know, anything that you guys want to see moving forward, just ask. I'll do the best I can to make that happen. Hopefully we're going to have some surprise guesses throughout the year in these videos, so it just won't be me all the time. So hope you guys enjoyed this kind of preseason primer video here. Next video we'll start getting a lot more into the strategy for the upcoming race of Daytona. Like I said, if there's anything that you guys want to see in the package, just hit me up. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.